When we speak of the British Raj, we often talk of railroads, administration, and grand viceroys. But behind the starched collars and Victorian grandeur lay a darker, unspoken truth. A truth about the brutal, exploitative, and often chilling sexual practices that defined the lives of the colonized. This is the history they don't teach you. For nearly a century, from 1858 to 1947, India was the crown jewel of the British Empire, an environment built on absolute power and racial supremacy. This power disparity wasn't just economic or political, it was deeply personal, manifesting in the most intimate and destructive ways. The Victorian moral code, so rigorously enforced in London, seemed to melt away in the Indian heat. For British soldiers and officials stationed thousands of miles from home, the lack of accountability, combined with the prevalent racial dehumanization of the Indian population, created a perfect storm for exploitation. We are talking about a system where consent was irrelevant and impunity was guaranteed. The most widespread, yet often misunderstood practice was the system of Bibi relationships. A Bibi was essentially a local woman taken as a mistress by a British officer. On the surface, some records portray these as relationships of convenience. But let's be clear, these were almost always born out of extreme power imbalance. The officer had wealth, position, and the law on his side. The woman often had nothing. For many women, being a Bibi was not a choice of affection, but a necessity for survival, a means to protect family, gain economic stability, or avoid starvation in a country ravaged by colonial policies. And the cruelty didn't end there. When the officer's tour ended, or when a proper English wife arrived, the Bibi and any children were often brutally abandoned, left without resources, and ostracized by their own society. Yet the practices went far beyond even this systematic abandonment. In the isolation of cantonments, and especially on remote indigo and tea plantations, the authority of the British owner or manager was absolute. Documents suggest that plantation owners often used their power to force women working the fields and their servants into sexual servitude. The fear of losing their livelihood, or worse, was the only enforcement needed.
What made these practices so brutal was the absolute legal impunity enjoyed by the British. The colonial legal system was designed to protect the colonizer. If an Indian woman reported a rape or sexual assault by a British man, the chances of a fair trial were almost zero. Eyewitness accounts were dismissed, and racial bias ensured that the British accused was almost always acquitted, often with a mere reprimand. This lack of legal consequence became a license for abuse. It cemented the belief among some British officers that Indian women were inherently inferior and existed primarily for their gratification, regardless of their will. This cruelty was fueled by the Victorian obsession with racial purity and the concept of the white man's burden. Indian women were often portrayed in colonial literature and art as exotic, but simultaneously less than human, a narrative that psychologically justified exploitation. This level of dehumanization allowed for acts that would be considered monstrous even in 19th century Britain. The real tragedy is the silence that followed. These stories were rarely recorded in official histories. They were passed down as whispered family secrets, scars carried by generations of Indian families. The trauma of abandonment, sexual violence, and systemic injustice became another forgotten cost of the empire. This sexual violence wasn't just the work of a few bad actors. It was an integral part of maintaining the power structure of the Raj. It was a tool of oppression. The British Raj was not just about control over land and resources, it was about the control of bodies. By exploring these brutal, forgotten practices, we uncover the full, uncompromising cost of imperialism, a cost measured not in shillings, but in the trauma and devastation inflicted upon the most vulnerable. This history is uncomfortable, but it is a truth that demands to be remembered. What other dark secrets from the Raj do you think should be brought to light? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more uncompromising explorations of history's untold stories.